Zero, one.
Hey, everybody, welcome to another episode of Kingdom Focus Podcast here. I'm super excited about today. I got a very special guest here with me, Mr. Joe Lazarus Dominguez, right? And so I'm just excited to hear some of his story and to be able to reach out to you guys. I really definitely feel like your story is going to impact so many beyond just town, and just go around the world, is the goal, right? And but we kind of want to just have a conversation, just an organic conversation about life. And again, it's a kingdom focused podcast, so we're going to kind of focus a little bit on what God's done for you and what God's done for myself as well, and how we can continue to motivate people and continue to give back to the community, right? And
Yeah.
so, and hopefully we can impact somebody that tunes in and watches. And so let me ask you this, Joe. If I gave you a 30-second just to describe who you are as a
Yeah.
person.
Oh wow. I would say that I think my primary, I guess, focus right now as a person, and I didn't realize this until I got older. Say, one of my defining attributes as I've gotten older, I realized there's just a kind, um, super caring individual. I don't think I've always described myself like that, but I've kind of evolved into it. I guess as you get a little older, you
Right.
know, for me anyway, I would say, I am a much kinder, caring individual moving through the world. I'm more aware of other people and their feelings and what they're going through. Probably because mostly what I've been through. But yeah, I would say that I am a also a man that's constantly, you know, questioning my motives and my future, and you know, keeping my creator in my daily conversation.
Okay.
And I am a guy that's constantly striving to do better and within myself.
Yeah.
Um, and of course that being with how I treat people and how I move through the world, and also somebody who's aspiring to do um, better things than I have done, and to make music, the best music that I can.
Yeah, man.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. Growing up, right? Growing up, we a list of questions I have here,
All right, no worries. Still,
right? But growing up, how
yeah,
would you describe your environment growing up that kind of made you a little bit of who you are today, and how that development and
yeah.
come across?
So we grew up in the same neighborhood in La
Yeah,
Colonia. Shout out
Colonia
La
for sure,
Colonia.
for sure.
We have a lot of friends and people that we still both know that
Yeah.
grew up there. Um, I think where for me, looking back and sort of analyzing it, I felt I grew up with a very limited mind frame. Like going to college or being successful
Right.
never really crossed my mind.
Hmm.
I just didn't see you know possibilities or capabilities, and so I realize now that you know you don't necessarily have to be a product of your environment, but it is an important aspect. And
Correct.
so now working with juveniles, seeing the kids that come in and listening to how they talk and knowing where they live, you see this sort of this ceiling that's put over them, the
Hmm.
environmental ceiling. Now, you can break through, and people do.
Right.
You broke through. I've
Right.
broken through. But so that being said, I grew up, thinking very limited, not thinking there was
Hmm.
very much possibility for myself. So I was in a step family situation. My mom and my dad got divorced when I was very young, and so that played a big role for me. You know,
Yeah.
I don't share this much, but I realized that I was a step kid,
Hmm.
and maybe not so much now. They call them blended families,
Right.
right?
Right.
But when you and I were growing up, and you got
Yeah.
introduced as a step kid,
Right.
you were like, um, I
Well,
don't know if
awkward,
it
kind of.
was more than awkward. It was very diminishing. It was a
Okay.
diminishing, label. And I think about that now because a lot of times I have struggled
Mm.
with mental health and like self worth.
Mhm.
And I ask myself often, like, what is it about? Why do
Yeah.
you why do you have this internal crack inside of you?
Mm.
No matter what, you seem to not feel very deserving of good things or whatever. And so, I'll kind of walk my mind a little bit with a guitar in my hand in my room and just kind of dwell on it. Sometimes ruminating on it a little bit too
Right.
much. Like, why am I so in this funk right now or whatever?
Right.
And so, yeah, I realized that I was a step kid and I was introduced thousands of times from the time I became a step kid up until the time I was 18 or
Mhm.
whenever I finally
Right.
left. Um, I remember being introduced at church, the grocery store, going to family outings, wherever. It's like, oh, this is my son, Robbie,
Mhm.
and this is Aaron, and that's my stepson. And
Mm.
I'm shorter, I'm a smaller kid than
Right.
the adults, and so then you would get both of them to kind of like, oh, and even the adult you were getting introduced to would almost snarl their lip, and I remember like putting my head down like in a shameful
Right.
way.
Right.
And so, talking about who I was and where I come from and everything like that, that became a very big factor for me. And it
Mm.
developed a large sense of anger inside of me from a very
Yeah.
young age. And also it didn't help that my mom and my stepmom had a really terrible relationship. You
Mm.
know, my mom, they would constantly fight and stuff like that, and it was really big. So that relationship kind of bled over into me being in the house. So they would get in a fist fight out in the porch.
Oh wow.
Well, there was fist fights, dude.
Yeah.
It was pretty gnarly. And then my real mom, God bless her, we have a great relationship to this day, and my stepmom as well. My stepmom's a cancer survivor now, so
Wow.
shout out to Linda.
Yes.
and
Yes.
and I have to say for the record, we've all made amends. This is all water under the bridge,
Right.
and
Right.
and we have a great relationship, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for her because you know, to speak on her behalf, we didn't make it easy either.
Right. Right.
My real mom coming in, and you know, it's just kind of cats and dogs whenever you have exes that are involved.
Right.
The
Right.
new girl and the old chick,
Right. Right.
and then it turns into a big fiasco most of the
Right.
time. And
And the kids get stuck in the middle.
bro,
Right.
man, we were stuck in the middle. And so my mom would come and sort of, get into it with Linda after dropping us off from being with her on the weekend, and they would have a fight. And God bless my mom, but I think she underestimated that we were still in the house.
Mm.
So after that fight,
Mm.
Joe and Natalie are still in there, and so well, your
Mm.
mom's not here, but you are, and
Yeah.
so that kind of started to play out, and I think that really developed in my stepmom. It gave her a great deal of anger. And of course, again, in her defense, I didn't make it easy either. Because I would go out with my real mom on the weekend or whatever, and she would, God bless her, but she would kind of do what an ex would do, badmouth the new woman, which
Right.
is
Right.
Linda. And me being a young man wanting to, please my mom, I would
Mhm.
drink in everything she would say. And then I'd go back over there. Then they'd get in a fight, and I might see Linda hit my mom, maybe get the better of her on one occasion, and so then I would internalize that,
Mm.
and so I would become Linda's little terrorist. You know what
Yeah.
I mean? I didn't necessarily make it. It wasn't a
Yeah.
one way street,
Right. Right.
and and so this just made for a really really anger filled house
Mhm.
and a tumultuous upbringing, and so I think that's kind of where I started to get in trouble. Is me from excuse me, from being in trouble and looking on. I was
Right.
always
Right.
doing
Right.
something mischievous, and as opposed to my brother Robbie, who I love, I have a great deal of respect for him. He was a very calm individual
Right.
and like
Right.
the coolest guy. He's the cool. He was like my Leon.
Okay.
Leon was like
Right.
good at everything,
Yeah.
very athletic, and Robbie was kind of the same way,
Shout
but
out to older brothers,
older
right, man?
brothers.
There
And
you go.
so, yeah, I think it was, that really set me on a path. And I remember going to school and being like a bully,
Mhm.
bullying other kids, and I kind of developed an anger towards women, towards
Mm.
females. So even though I
Mm.
was low key like doing what my mom told me to do, like as far as mistreating Linda, and she never told me per se to mistreat her, but
Right.
I would get
It was there.
what she would say, and I used to
Yeah.
get and which gave me the green light. Oh, it's open season. I'm gonna cuss her out, or
Mm.
I'm gonna throw some of her shoes away, or something like that, or hide her
Yeah.
purse, and so that would I would go to school and maybe get yelled at for not paying attention or something, cuss the teacher out. You know what I mean? And then I started developing this sort of aggravation towards women, which of course I didn't get that. I didn't find this out, and I wasn't. They used to ask me so much when I was younger this big question, and maybe somebody can relate to it. You know, they would say, "What's wrong with you?" An adult or a counselor at school, they'd be
Yeah.
like, they'd scoot their chair forward and put their hands on my knees and say, "What's wrong with you? What's bothering you?" And I'm like, I didn't have the vocabulary that I have now, of course,
Right.
the analytical side
Right.
to put a label on it.
Correct.
But now that I'm older, I'm talking about where I grew up and how it ended up shaping me and things like that. The whole step family thing that you kind of hear about, or it was a cliche back then: stepson, step
Hmm.
family. It had a very negative connotation to it, based off all the stuff I was just saying, it kind of veered me onto a path of anger and
Hmm.
resentment at a very early age. And then, you know, once somebody introduced alcohol to me,
Mm.
and it kind of numbed it for the first time. I was like, "Ah,
That's good.
I don't feel it. Well,
Yeah.
I don't
Right.
feel it. I'm numb.
Yeah.
I don't feel this constant tension in my mind of what my reality is. And so then that was a whole nother animal. But
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. You
you know,
know, the crazy thing is, right? I have stepkids and a blended family, right?
oh wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. So, and I don't. I try not to do that and try not to introduce them like that, like as a step, right?
Right.
Because I tell people, this is my boy, this is my daughter, this is what we have. And here's the reason why for it. My daughter, from
Yeah.
my first wife,
Yeah.
she has a stepdad as well,
Oh wow. Okay.
right? So, and how I visualized it is sowing a seed.
Yeah.
I'm gonna treat these kids, right? I'm gonna treat these babies
Yeah.
how I want my baby treated.
Right.
And I think you're right that sometimes there's so many blended families and that are mixed in. I say that's one of the hardest things to deal with
Yeah.
for as an adult. Like
Yeah.
how do you want a parent, but there is always that boundary,
Yeah.
right, that you have to do, and you try to find that mix where, okay, this is where I'm gonna draw the line, right, and this is as far I can go, and then the other parent has to kind of carry the rest of it out,
Right.
but to want to sow a seed into their life because I want that person treating my daughter that way. And I
Right.
think sometimes as parent, if we look at it like that, like, okay, I want if you have a stepchild, so to speak, right, and you have other children that treat them the way you would want somebody treating yours because you're sowing a seed
Right.
initially, right? Essentially. And so with that, like my older boy, right, just graduated Coast Guard, went up to Seattle. He's gonna be in Seattle
Wow.
for the next 4 years. And
Wow, that's
my
amazing.
yeah, my daughter, right, with her mom, she's graduating high school this year, and she's going up to Colorado to go to college in Colorado. And so it's like then God starts to show you the seeds were planted. Now they're coming, right? They're growing,
Wow.
and so, but it is that's a road, man, that gets traveled down a whole lot, and it can go both ways. It can be a good thing or it can be a bad thing, right? But I
Yeah.
think at the end of the day, we have to think about the kids that are in the middle of that because,
Yeah.
like you said, sometimes we can show a bad side of it, and without even realizing it, like
Sure.
that the children are they're taking it in, right, and that can
Yeah.
have a negative impact temporarily. Because I
Yeah.
truly believe that, and I say this a lot to people that we don't go through things
Yeah.
just to go through them for kicks and giggles,
Right.
and we don't go through things for ourselves to say, "Hey, I went through this and I survived."
Right.
Right? I think we go through things for this moment to share with other people that you can go through this and
Yeah.
you can overcome it.
Right.
Right? You can beat it. You can beat
Yeah.
the odds, like you said, your mom, right? Beating the odds of cancer. and now that's a story she can share with people, that hey, I beat this and you can too, right? And
Yeah.
so that shaped you and to part of that man that you are today, right? And which is good because you came full circle,
Yeah.
right? Come full
Absolutely.
circle,
For sure.
and so tell us a little more about your background. Like, how did you come across playing the guitar? Like, where did that gift come from? Because it's true. I'm not gonna say a talent.
Yeah.
'Cause I truly believe what you have is a gift,
Yeah.
and you've played at our church.
Yeah.
And every time I see you at our church, I get excited.
I
I,
appreciate
I, I
that.
do, brother. I
Thank you.
get excited, and I know there was even time I requested a certain song on a Sunday morning when I saw you, and you
Yeah.
play it.
Yeah.
Because I think when people when they have an anointing on,
Yeah.
that's different than talent, brother.
Sure.
That's just a true gift that comes from God, and it comes natural, and it's so great. And so when I see you, I'm like, man, this is gonna be awesome. Like it's gonna because then once you get into the middle of it, like God just takes over, and it's just an amazing thing. So tell
Yeah.
us how did you pick that instrument?
Um. Well, it really started with my dad. My dad was a huge music fan when I was growing up. Um. He had such a broad taste in music. He'd play country, then cumbia, and then he'd be playing classic rock, and then he'd watch MTV,
Okay.
Tom Petty, and so music was, and unbelievably, shockingly, if you see my dad, you would never thought this. He was a huge fan of Michael Jackson.
Oh wow.
And so, that was actually my first. Well, Michael Jackson was everything back then,
Right,
right?
right,
He
right.
just he was like Elvis.
Yeah, King of Pop.
Right. And but I remember one day specifically talking about the guitar. I had gotten in trouble at school, and I got suspended. I think maybe I was in the fourth grade or something like that. I was at Taylor Ray, I think it was,
Okay. Yeah.
and I guess it's pretty funny. It was raining outside. We got there. There was the morning drop off. The bus dropped us off, and it was raining outside. And for some reason, do you remember a guy named Aaron Green? He was a guy that once. Oh, I forget. You're a little younger.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
so
a little bit. Yeah.
we had this
A
great
little bit younger.
idea, a little bit younger. So we had this great idea that we were going to go outside and run in the rain, from like in the different school exits.
Okay.
I don't know why we did that. We were like playing commando or acting like we were in a movie or
Right.
something.
Being kids.
Yeah, being kids. And little little, to our knowledge, we didn't know that they were throwing red flags inside. Like, where are these kids at? We just saw them. Where are these two kids? And so they start going into sort of panic mode, and they call parents, and they start really panicking because they had saw us and we're gone. And I know as an adult now,
You can see how
two
that
two
looks.
kids being gone, it's like, oh my God, what do we do with them? And we're outside playing commando. And they call my parent. I mean, they call my dad. He's got to leave work to come pick me up. And he gives me the business when I get home. And then of course, like a great dad, um, goes in my room after whipping me and tells me, "Come on, let's go to Blockbuster Video." And he took me to Blockbuster Video for the younger crowd.
Y'all,
For the
yeah.
younger crowd, um, everything wasn't available on your phone or
That's
on
right.
a
For a
computer.
streaming service.
It was like Redbox. I mean, you had to go to a place, but this was an entire store. You had to go to a
Right.
place and rent a movie. And he rented a concert by Pink Floyd, live and in concert. And their guitarist is named David Gilmour. And I remember watching this, and my dad fell asleep on the couch. He put it in right away. And I watched this whole like 2 hour concert of this guy with this red guitar, a Fender Stratocaster, which is kind of not kind of, it's the one that I have now. And I remember just staring at him, and he's just woo, just making this thing sing, and he's making all his faces while he's playing. And I remember just lighting up inside, just like, people say, you hear this, what do you want to be when you grow older?
Right. Right.
And I remember, people, cops, lawyer, doctor,
Right.
whatever, go to the military.
Yeah.
And I remember in my heart saying, I want to do that.
Wow.
And so that wouldn't coalesce or manifest for many years. I would continue to go on and get in trouble. And I think once I took my dad bought a cheap guitar for me, and I went and took lessons. But I didn't know how to practice or tune it. And the lesson immediately, they went to show me how to make a chord, something like that. And they didn't really tell me how to tune it, and we didn't know how to do it. There wasn't YouTube back then, so where
Hmm.
you could just look
Right.
and do it. and so it just sat in the closet, and I didn't do anything with it. But the love and the passion for music was always there.
Okay.
Um, I would, listen to the radio. I remember one year, my fifth grade year at Taylor A. At the end of the year, my dad went up to the school because they had confiscated like 5 Walkmans from me. Which for the younger crowd, a Walkman was a little radio that you could carry around and put big clunky headphones on like this. I would sneak them out of the house or sneak my dad's out and say I didn't know where they were, and I would take them to school and try to put them on, and they would confiscate them. And I remember, one year at the end of the fifth grade year, when he went and picked it up, it was a box of all the Walkmans that he had
Oh
thought he
wow.
lost that I had been stealing from him and tell him I don't know where they're at, Pop. I don't know. And at night I would listen to him and listen to the radio and put in the tape of
Yeah.
Pink Floyd. And so
Wow.
that's where the guitar started. And it would not come to fruition in my life until I actually ended up getting incarcerated later on in my life. I got incarcerated in prison, and I was halfway through my sentence, and I got sent to a prison that had a music program. They had church in there, and this old man. I remember watching him play. He was the guitarist on the church band. I remember asking him if he'd teach me, and he gave me this really gruff response and was like, all you kids come in here and you just want me to teach you a Metallica song, and I'll never see you again, and then you go home. He had
Yeah.
big time. He had like 20 years,
Wow.
and he was already like 65. And
Mm.
so anyway, I kept bugging him, and finally he said, if you let me teach you music theory, I'll let you play this guitar. And I remember at the time I was about 20 something. So I was like, if I wanted to, I could just take that guitar from you, sir. You know what I mean? And he was like,
Yeah.
but that was me being a knucklehead. But anyway,
Right.
so for like the next several months, I would show up to the church house where they would practice, and he would teach me music theory, about chord structures and key structures and different modes and different scales. And I just would write it down. He would say, what's the key? What notes are the key of C? If I'm going to play lead guitar over it, what notes would I play? If I want to play a minor pentatonic over it, what would I play? If I want to play a major pentatonic, what is a 1 4 5 chords in blues? What's a diatonic scale? What are the notes and the key of G sharp? And so I would
Wow.
write these down. And well, you're locked up, so you have nothing else to do. So
True.
you're saying, wow, but I would for hours.
Yeah, that's what you did.
It's either like I'm just gonna sit there or play dominoes. And so anyway, that's how I ended up learning. And then he ended up going home, and I didn't know that he was going home. But one day I went there to do our little,
Right.
exercises, and he was like, "Here," he handed me the guitar, and he was like, "I'm gonna be leaving. I got my note that I made parole, and sort of, he was gonna be heading out, and he let me start playing. He started showing me how to play, and because I had the
The
mental
knowledge now.
knowledge.
Yeah.
Now I just had to, and then I didn't realize how much it hurts because the guitar essentially wires, and
Mhm.
you're
Mhm.
squeezing down on them and doing all this. And so once I built up the calluses, I learned really quickly, and then I ended up playing on the church band there, and that particular church band would go and travel. We would
Oh.
leave the prison.
Oh wow.
Yeah,
Okay.
you'd have to get a trustee status,
Right.
and the warden would have to sign off on you, and they would let you leave the prison, and you go to churches under
Oh.
armed guard, of
Right.
course,
Right.
under
Right.
armed guard, of course. And yeah, we would go up there and play. So
Wow.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was
Evangelizing worship team, huh?
there. I
Just
was,
with an
man.
incarcerated.
So
Yeah.
that's how the guitar I actually learned in the Texas penitentiary.
Wow.
Yeah,
And I say wow because I'm sitting here and I'm thinking, right? Sometimes the road least traveled or unexpectedly traveled.
yeah,
I always, whenever God is going to use you, He's going to put you through some things,
yeah.
and and sometimes He has to isolate us a little bit,
That's huge what you just said because I would have never stopped to learn.
right?
I would have never taken it because I was such a busybody, always trying to go out and
Yeah,
party or whatever. I
and
would
so
have never done that.
the way He knew to get your full attention was to allow you to go through these certain, but still has to have His hand on you
Yeah,
so that you would survive because I'm pretty sure you've been in some tough situations that could have gone the other way, right?
yeah,
But yet here we are today because He was able to isolate you. And then here's the other thing. This older gentleman
yeah,
in prison. that probably helped out many, didn't help out many, and probably didn't refuse to help out some guys, right? Because
Yeah.
they didn't want to follow his instruction.
Yeah.
But to sow that seed into you, and then to really get you, okay, how serious are you about this? And now you got the time to be able to get educated on it
Yeah.
and to fully, and then now you have some alone time with you, the music, and God, and then the gifting starts to come about, right? So no matter where we are in life, sometimes even if we can't see it,
Yeah.
God has us there.
Yeah.
God has us there, man, and to know and to see it now all come to life, right? And so
Yeah.
somebody had to preach to Billy Graham,
Yeah.
and Billy Graham now known all around the world, right?
Yeah.
Somebody had to teach Joe
Yeah.
how to play the guitar, and so it all starts with something. We never know who we're gonna touch,
Who you're impacting.
and
Yeah.
who you're impacting.
Yeah.
And so being you mentioned, right, being a juvenile, doing all those things, and then working with kids now.
Yeah.
So what do you do now for your regular 9 to 5 outside of the music? What is it that you do on a daily basis for work?
Um, I am a detention officer at the Fort Bend County Juvenile,
Okay.
where I was incarcerated at as a young man. I
Wow.
was
Yeah.
uh I was there at I think 13 years old, 14 years old, 15 years old, 16 years old, all the way up until the time where I, you know, finally bit the big one and went to the big boy jail. But yeah, so I worked with the juveniles now at the Fort Bend County Juvenile, which was really crazy in me getting that job because I was in oil and gas for a long time, and I really like
Hmm.
was one thing about the oil and gas is it can pay good, but
Right.
they kind of require your life in
Y-
exchange.
Right.
It's the
Correct.
hours, and
Yeah, for
so
sure.
because that side of life or that sort of career path, it's all about production.
Right.
It's production, 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 and so upstream, downstream, everything is in a hurry, everything is nonstop, and
Right.
we need more of your time. And so that was the last job that I had before this, and it just wasn't going well for me. I really, really hated it. It was constant overtime. It was the kind of job where they would say it'd be Friday at 4 o'clock, and my boss would come out and say, "Hey, man, we got this big order that's going to be due next week on Wednesday, but it's a really big order, so I want you guys to go ahead and work this weekend
Hmm.
and get ready for it." And I'm like, "It's 4 o'clock. Guys are already." You know what I mean? One guy
Yeah.
asked me if he could leave 10 minutes ago. You want me to tell him? And you'd get a harsh answer or whatever like that.
Right.
And so that just started happening more and more frequent, and I just began to really, when you hate your job, you're at work more than you're at home, and you hate it. It just becomes this sort of soul sucking thing where you're
Yeah.
like, I can't believe that, and you start to get offended by it. You're like, well, I'm trading my life for this paycheck. And I started to get
Mhm.
offended by my paycheck. I'm like, yeah, that's great. I mean, you're paying my bills, but look what I got to give for you.
Right.
And I wasn't playing music or anything like that. And so I remember having this sort of moment of clarity where I said, if I died right now, I would be so unhappy because like I'm not doing anything that Joe is good at. I'm not
Mhm.
I'm not doing music. I'm not helping people. I'm not able to share my experience or love anybody or these sort of attributes that developed in me as I got older. Um, and I was really upset with myself because I, I felt like that job required so much of me, and I would really have to struggle to do the job, which I could do, but it sort of felt like I was always just 2% under par, and I,
Yeah.
I think maybe that's a managing technique where they
Yeah.
they never let you feel that you're doing that great. It's always like you're a little short, so you're constantly chasing the carrot,
Right.
you know.
Right.
And I think and I think they would utilize that. But anyway, so I threw up a hail mary in life. I threw up a hail mary, and I said, you know, if I can go and help somebody, just one person,
Mhm.
um, then I maybe could die, maybe a little happy with myself. And so, um, I started looking for different jobs first of all, and then I saw on Indeed Fort Meade County was hiring for a detention officer, and so I was like, that's something that I would perhaps be happy doing, helping somebody out, these young kids that go through what I'd gone through,
Right.
and I filled it out, and I didn't think I had a chance, at all to get the
Mm.
job because of my background and everything like that, and I got a call in for an interview, and so I went in for the interview, and it went good. I was really nervous. I had to pull back up to the place that I used to be locked up at.
PTSD a little bit.
It's the first time I've ever been back, really, and
Right.
I'm walking in and I'm sweating bullets. I'm so
Oh
nervous,
man.
and I got to go meet with the chief, you know,
Oh wow.
and I meet with them, and I'm just super nervous. And I have this really impressive resume in oil and gas, but they're like, well, because I was doing branch operations manager for several different locations and shipping internationally all over the world. Using great big barges to move our
Right.
tools and our equipment, and dealing with customs and dealing with customs brokers, and putting equipment on planes, and some really
Wow.
intense international shipping in oil and gas. That I remember one time getting a call in the middle of the night from the UAE, um, from overseas,
Okay.
from
From Saudi. Saudi.
yeah,
Yeah. Saudi.
and the Emirates,
Okay.
right? And we got a call. I get a call in the middle of the night that um, this barge that we had put a piece of our equipment on, they couldn't get it off because it wouldn't start. And it was a huge vibration vehicle that vibrated seismic energy
Hmm.
into the ground that they would use, and they would use different nodes and detectors to see what was under the ground, right?
Right.
And so they couldn't get it off, and and they called me in the middle of the night, and they're like, we can't get this thing off, and we're going to take off, and the next place we're going to stop is Russia. This is not going to come back to the United States for another 2 months. So if you can't get me a
Wow.
mechanic right now on the phone to figure out how to get this off, you're gonna lose this. And that was like, man, that was like a $500,000 vehicle.
Wow.
And so, but that's just a little
Yeah. 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 For
that
sure.
you get the call in the middle of the night, and you're like,
In a panic. Yeah.
and so anyway, so I threw up a Hail Mary. I go get this interview for this job and everything like that. And so they call me back for a second interview, and then they tell me that the pay, and I'm was accustomed to making oil and gas money,
Yeah. Significant
and
difference.
it was going to be a substantial difference. And so you know, despite me being a highly functioning, competent, intelligent individual, that didn't necessarily hold any weight over here
Right.
in working with kids. And so they were like, okay, we did the interview, and then they came back with an offer letter. And they're like, well, we're going to do a background check on you. But every moment along this journey, this interview journey, I'm thinking in my head, it's not going to happen. I'm gonna, they're gonna say, oh, we can't work with
Yeah.
you. And so they're like, well, we got to do an FBI background check on you.
Oh wow.
You're gonna have to
Yeah.
do your thumbprints. And I'm like, oh, this is it. I might as well not even go. I literally pulled up into the office that day, or at that location, was like, I'm not even gonna walk in. I almost didn't walk in. And
Wow.
so finally I did, and they did it. And so I go back to my regular job, and I'm like, they're not gonna call me back. And they call me back. And so they made an offer, and I was like, all right, I'll try it. And so,
Yeah.
I went back, and I ended up, I'm still working there to this day. Um,
How long ago was that?
going on 2 years.
Okay.
Going on two
Nice.
years. Yeah, it's been a really crazy journey working with the kids, and seeing what our young troubled young men are going through these days. The impact of really the crazy thing, Mike, looking at the impact of music
Hmm.
in young boys' lives. All these young kids go in there, and they're all rapping about guns. Like they'll sit at the table and rap and whatever, and they all rap about
Yeah.
what they're hearing in the music. They're
Yeah.
repeating it, and I'm thinking back as a musician. I hear it, and I'm like, wow, the impact of what they're hearing has
Correct.
penetrated their little souls, and they're
Yes.
regurgitating it,
Yes.
and they carry this attitude around, and they start
Yeah.
trying to be when you and I were younger, we were trying to be Arnold Schwarzenegger and
Right.
John Rambo and
Yeah.
that kind of thing. These guys are trying to be, you
Yeah.
know, Kendrick Lamar and talking about, violence, Lil Baby, and all
Hmm.
these kind of rappers who are constantly talking about spinning the block and shooting
Right.
guns. And
Right.
so,
So,
but anyway,
and we can and that we can do a spinoff of that, right? I tell people all the time too this that who Satan in the Bible, what was his first job? Right? He was the head worship leader in the heavens. Right? The Bible says that his body was created for music. Right? So he ushered in the presence of God with worship. And so what does Satan do? Satan knows how to flip everything. And so now
yeah,
if we start looking at the thing spiritually, he still knows the power of music.
yeah,
And the power of music can destroy people,
yeah,
right? And it can be to the impact, like you said, where they put them headphones in right now. It's just they're just penetrating all day long, just the hate, the violence, the
yeah,
and all that constantly, 24 hours a day, right? And then of course, eventually you're gonna start to sing it, which now you're speaking it,
yeah,
and you're gonna start speaking it over and over. It's gonna get into your head and it's gonna get into your heart, right? And you're gonna start to believe it,
yeah,
and then you start getting influenced by the alcohol, you start getting influenced by the drugs, and now you're not in control of yourself
no,
anymore. And so now something else is taking over you,
something is controlling you.
right? Something is controlling you, and it all started with the music. It's just music, right? But we can play a beat and we can instantly know what it is,
Yeah,
and it's powerful. And that's why I think worship music in the church is so powerful on a Sunday morning
yeah,
because everybody's together, everybody's in unity, right? And what and I challenge our church, and I had said this one time. I said, if you need a life altering event,
yeah,
come to that altar.
yeah,
That's the first, if you need that, that life changing moment, that's where it happens at.
yeah,
And music's such a powerful, powerful thing.
yeah,
There's even been studies on certain songs that these musicians were playing, and they're like, how did they even do it?
yeah,
There's no way naturally they can even do that.
yeah.
Something took over and allowed them to do that.
Some of the stuff you hear, you feel like when I listen to an old album like Led Zeppelin, the guy, the guitarist for Led Zeppelin, which is a really, really famous classic rock band, he was. I found this out later on. I was let down by it. He was into satanic rituals, and I
Yeah.
didn't know this. And I found this out later on. Some
Wow.
guitarists. The guy was a guitarist named Jack White. He played for the White Stripes. He did that Seven Nation Army song that was really
Okay.
popular on the Buzz for a while. And he was doing an interview, and he was like, "Oh yeah, I met this guy," and he was like, "Yeah, it was kind of weird, man. He's kind of talking some weird stuff about Satanism and all
Yeah.
that." And when you go back and you listen to some of the Led Zeppelin guitar, I mean, as a guitarist and knowing a little bit of music theory, it's so unconventional what he plays. It's
Mm.
super unconventional. It's like he tuned the guitar different. He did some really, and when you hear the music, it's hypnotizing.
Yeah.
And when I found out this guy was, more to your point, yeah, or what we're talking about,
Right.
the
Power
power
of
of
music.
music, yeah. And so, working with these kids, and that's pretty much what I do now. Unbelievably, the song that I just put out in the name of the Father, kind of the backstory to that, really quickly was the song was unfinished, and one day I told the kids, making conversation with them, that I played the guitar, and they were like, "Oh, you don't play the guitar," and they were kind of making fun of me and everything like that, as they do.
Right.
And then one day a preacher walked in with a guitar because they have church services
Hmm.
several times a week, which is good. And they just were like, "Hey," one of the kids was trying to, sort of put me on the spot. He was like, "Hey, this guy says he tells the preacher, this guy says he can play the
Challenge.
guitar, yeah." And so the preacher's like, "Can you?" And so I was like, "Okay, I'll play it."
Right.
And so I got up there and got stage fright. And I'm like, "Oh, what am I gonna do? And what am I gonna play?" And
Wow.
so then I played my song in the name of the Father. And by the time I got to the last chorus, the kids were singing along with it.
Mm.
With in the name of the Father, they were
Right.
singing the
Right.
the chorus, which is
Right.
catchy. I don't mind saying
Yes.
so myself. And like for like 3 weeks after that, every time that preacher would come with his guitar, he would be like, "Play your song," and the kids were like, "Yeah, Mr. Joe, play," and they were singing the song almost start to finish. And then I was like, "Wow," because if you can get kids to
Yes.
hum a melody, then that means it's catchy.
Yeah.
It's simple enough to be memorized, and that's kind of
Mm.
what you want musically. You want a melody that's kind of hummable and
Right.
easy to remember.
Yeah.
And so, but anyway, but yeah, so
Wow. So how do these kids in there like have you shared some of your story and backstory with them and what is their reaction to that?
you know, sometimes it's quite upsetting because you don't, you know, you don't feel like they care. They're just in such a young state. Youth is blinding. It
Yes.
really is. You can't see. For your parents to say, "Hey, if you do good this semester, next summer we'll," that you might as well say, "Hey, whenever we get to Mars, I'm gonna let you drive the
Right.
car," and it seems like super impossible. So you tell them what you've gone through, and it it's kind of a letdown at times because it's kind of eye rolls,
Mhm.
typical kid stuff.
Yeah.
And so there are a lot of times where I feel like my presence doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? We're just like
Yeah.
they're like you know they're some can be pretty hard on the staff as far as
Yeah.
treating you rude and disrespectfully, and so but not everybody. And so sometimes I guess to answer your question as honestly as possible, I don't think that my presence plays that big of a role.
Yeah.
I don't. Now, um, there is a guy that works there now. His name is Frankie Hill. And he's like a director there now. He's a really high up. He was an officer, a detention officer, whenever I was incarcerated there,
Mhm.
and he's now you know like the director or close to it. And so I have memories of him saying positive things and being positive towards
Mm.
people. And so I remember one time I got locked up there in juvenile, and I remember crying in my cell as a young boy, and I remember him opening the door and being like, "What's wrong, youngster?" And I was like crying. I stole my parents' car that night and got pulled over in it. And he was like, "It's gonna be all right, man." He had a very kind word to
Mhm.
say. And even though it didn't do much at that moment to sort of minimize my turmoil that I was going through, I still remembered it as an adult, and he
Yeah.
still made an impact. So even though it doesn't feel initially right now that I'm making any impact, perhaps down the road it could be like I remember you being kind to me, or your
Right.
music inspired me, or something like
Yeah.
that. But it's kind of hard and difficult sometimes, if I'm honest. You don't see anything initially,
Yeah.
which we rarely do.
Right.
Rarely do you do
Right.
something and you see an immediate,
Right. Correct.
So
And full circle moment, right, is you going back to working there.
yeah,
And I was share with everybody, I worked there at one point in time doing the same thing, detention officer, ran a
yeah,
mentoring program,
yeah. I just
and
found that
so
out not too long ago about you.
yeah, so you say names like that, like right, and we worked. He wasn't a detention officer. He just gotten his first promotion,
Yeah,
Frankie Hill, and
yeah,
there's some words too that he told me that encouraged me, and it made me think. And I carry this with me today as well. Is he said, respect will get you a lot further than intimidation. And what he meant by that is, as a detention officer, you can try to intimidate the kids,
yeah,
right? And you can try to intimidate them. And I got the authority over you, a lot like law enforcement, right? They'll try to intimidate you by the authority, but having a step back and just having that respect for them as a human and as an individual, because they're not going to be locked up all their life,
right,
right? They will be out, and there's so many times now that I run into kids that were in there
yeah,
in the mentoring program that I did run,
right,
that we had, that I would run into them to this day now, and I would have conversations with them, run into them at the local convenience store, at a store with my wife, and we'd have conversations. And
yeah,
but it's like you said, right? And they remembered me. They remember things that I've done for them, and it comes full circle. It didn't took 20 years plus, right, for you to
yeah,
see it. But I think those moments God shows you, like, hey, you made an impact. You still did something, like it. You influenced in a way, so it's pretty cool to see, like, and like you said, it's never going to be instant, but later down the road. right? They'll be able to sit there and be like, "Man, I remember that guy. I remember
Yeah.
conversations." And whenever we just recently took over as youth pastors for the church,
Yeah.
I struggled with it for a little bit. I didn't know if I wanted because I'm a lot older now,
Sure.
right? And like, man, God, like, how am I going to do this? I'm not young. I'm not dressed like these young kids. I'm not doing none of that. And God really spoke to me and He said, I'm not calling you to look like them. I'm calling you to impact them to look like you and to look like me.
Yeah.
So it's sometimes we want to blend in, but sometimes we have to stand out for God, right?
Yeah.
And we have to be that exception to
Yeah.
where they see something. It's you have to try to elevate them to come up to your level, and I think you're on that path
Yeah.
where you're now influencing through music, through and even though we think they're not listening,
Yeah.
or we think, and because it happens with our own children, they're just like, right, I mean, as a kid, that's what we did, right? It's like
Adults are
adults,
dumb. They don't know anything.
and
Yeah.
I just told the youth last night. I told them, I said, I had a conversation with my kids. I said, one day you're gonna grow up. I said, and you're gonna walk into a wall of stupid,
Yeah.
right? And they're like, what? And I said, you're gonna be about 16 or 17 years old. I said, you're gonna wake up, you're gonna stretch out of bed, you're gonna feel good about yourself. I said, you're gonna open your door, you're gonna walk out of your bedroom. I said, and everything all of a sudden is you're gonna be like, I know, I know, I know, right? I know. You try to have a conversation, yeah, I know. I know. So,
God, I despise that.
right? And they all started laughing last
Yeah.
night, right? And so they're all about 16 and 17.
Yeah.
I said, does that sound familiar? And so whenever my daughter was like, "Oh, I know, I know, I know," said you open up that wall and that air hit you, huh? Like because it becomes, that's just what all like you said though, they're blinded, right?
Yeah.
They know everything. They
Youth
get
is
to that
blinding.
point. It's very youth is blinding, man. That is good. So let's see here. So let me ask you this: what has motivated you to pursue that path and your calling? What's been your biggest motivation for that?
Um, I think that it kind of just happened. It was happenstance. It wasn't a particular. Well, it wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't any particular motivation. Like it was that which I told you about me
Hmm.
not wanting to work in oil and gas or
Right?
not wanting to work in a job where you have to give up your entire life
Yeah.
to be a part of and make a living. Um, it was more so, to be honest with you, Mike, me being tossed around by life. Um, I had a really, a divorce, and it wasn't terrible. It was pretty clean as far as divorces go, but it was so impactful on me. It was about 5 years ago. It was so impactful on me because um, I didn't realize how much I depended on this other person as my identity. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
Um, because she was such a great person and upstanding and character, and people respected her and everything like that. And that kind of shined on me a little bit,
Hmm.
kind of cleaned me up a little bit because I was so
Yeah.
close to that person, and it kind of, I think it made more people receptive to me. And then so losing that, um, you know, for the first time ever, because we got together as soon as I got out of jail. Losing that, it was the first time I ever kind of had to stand on my own. So it was like, here I am in my 30s. tr- I have to learn how to be a man, and it, find myself. Who is Joe without this person?
Yeah.
What are you? Are you just this?
Discover yourself. Yeah.
Are you still this not so upstanding guy? You're just a guy who went to prison and not much else. You don't have any kids. You don't have a home. And so I started to really go through a sort of a storm in life, as far as finding out who I was in this world, who I am to God, who am I to
Hmm.
my family. And it was kind of being tossed around in that. in that time that's led me to where I was at. But to my credit, which I don't do a lot, I'm surprised I'm actually saying that. To my credit, and to my dad's credit, and to my s- I hate calling her my stepmom, but
Mhm.
just so for reference to know who I'm talking
Right.
about. To her credit as well, one thing that they always did was they kept us in church.
Mm.
Shockingly enough, always being in, great turmoil at home because of me acting out and whatever, and being so difficult to handle, you had to go to church. I was suspended from school. Okay, you're going to church. There's a family event on Saturday. Okay, we're going to church.
Yeah.
And we might even be arguing. My parents might even be arguing on the way to church about something that I did the night before,
Yeah.
tearing each other. You watching like Satan just really rip at each other,
Mhm.
and we'd go sit in church. And then afterwards, we'd come home. And I remember this one time coming home from church, I had started a fight with a guy in Econia. Do you remember the Guytons, Joseph Guyton?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
okay, so I had, said something disrespectful to his mom one day at the park, and with that, my parents had come home from church, and were fellowshipping with some other family. Um, and this guy comes to our door. There's probably 10 people inside of the house. We're eating and everything like that from church and stuff. And here comes this gang of people to fight me because of something that I said. I mouthed off to
Wow.
somebody's parent.
Yeah.
And so just my point is like, with that, them dealing with my behavior, but still requiring me to go to church.
Yeah.
And so, talking about fast forwarding that to now, to your question is like, what brought me to where I'm at. I think the biggest thing that has brought me to where I'm at is my belief in God, and my internal desire to find my creator and talk to him. And, I have this saying that's kind of silly, that in my experience, what I've gone through, which is pretty intense at times. I'm sure most people have intense experiences as well. But I think mine's unique in the sense of going to prison and everything like that, and then working with what I'm doing now and playing guitar and stuff.
Mhm.
Um, God doesn't speak English, and He doesn't operate on man-made time frames.
Mhm.
And so, I've never really, He doesn't talk to me per se in my language, which is English, and tell me what's next.
Right.
He speaks in circumstance. And I've unfortunately, I don't know, is because of my personality and makeup, I have tumbled and stumbled and been in washing machine cycle, spin cycle, and storms, and primarily to my own making, because of my own making.
Yeah.
And from that, I have kind of tumbled my way into where I am at now,
Mm.
um, leaving behind, so many years of regretful behavior.
Yeah.
So yeah, I've kind of stumbled in, and even me getting this job, um, you know, I just kind of stumbled into it. It's just always been like Hail Marys. I'm just like, okay, I'm gonna try this,
Yeah.
and even with this song, okay, I'm gonna try that. I'm gonna try this. I'm just being in prayer, in my personal life at home, and kind of talking to God throughout my day, and just wondering where He's gonna take me, but being terrified almost all the time of what's next, because
Yeah.
it seems like in my life it's big.
Yeah.
And I don't know about
Right.
other people's experiences, and I'm sure they have the same, but it just seems like it's never really, and maybe it's to my own doing, that it's never really just level off for
Right.
very long. And
Yeah.
then so that's kind of,
Nice.
yeah, I'm in the tumbling machine of life, kind of fighting my way to some place.
Yeah, man. No, and that's big faith, man.
Yeah,
It takes a lot of faith, brother, to launch those Hail Marys,
yeah,
because you don't know what's on the other side. And that's exactly what faith is, right? Is believing in something that yet you haven't even seen it. So you don't know what's the outcome's gonna be.
yeah,
You just do it, you take that step. You didn't know about if you're gonna get the job, but you said, hey, you know what? I'm gonna just go and take that next step and have that faith, and God opens up doors, and doors that maybe shouldn't even be open to normally under normal circumstances.
yeah,
But we don't have a normal circumstance God,
right,
right? God knows exactly where you need to be, right? And so let me ask you this, Joe. What has been your biggest challenge and how did you overcome it? Musically. Let's talk music here. Let's get into music.
Okay.
So musically, how did you what has been your biggest challenge facing music and how did you overcome that challenge?
Music. I think probably my jobs. Well, and also fear, being
Okay.
scared. I I've been a living room musician, or my own room musician for many years, and there's always been a desire in me to perform. It's like me telling you the story about Pink Floyd and being as a young
Mhm.
kid, man. I want to do that.
Right.
Um, I just never thought that it would coalesce or ever happen or come about. You tell yourself, "Oh, it's just a pipe dream." I'm nobody. I'm just well. This is my internal dialogue anyway. I'm nobody. I'm just a guy who knows how to play guitar. And Sonia, I got to give Sonia a great deal of credit because I think she would hear me play from time to time, and I forget what it's like to be that close to somebody who doesn't do it. So I forget how powerful me doing this in front of you is because I do it all the time.
Right.
And when I do it in front of somebody, because if you're honest, you're not around people for the most part are not around people playing instruments. And
Right.
so when you
Yeah.
see somebody pick it up and just start whipping it, you're like, wow, you know
Yeah.
what I mean? And I
Yeah.
forget about that. I forget
Gotcha.
about that wow factor.
That's your norm.
Yeah, it's my
That's
norm. There you
yeah.
go. Great way to put it. And so, people are like, oh my God, where'd you get this guy? Look at him go. I kind of forget about that. And I remember talking to her one time and she's like, man, you need to be performing. You're really good. And unbelievably, it just kind of happened. I met a friend. I played at a crawfish boil, and his wife, helped me start a website. And we had the first iteration of me performing, which is Joe Possum.
Mm.
And I started doing that, and then I wanted to move into more of a spiritual aspect because my original songs, like "In the Name of the Father" and many more that I have that I'm working on trying to finish the album. Um, they're more spiritual. So I wanted to sort of rebrand and rename myself.
Mhm.
I didn't think Joe Possum would be very great in church. You know what I mean? And
Yeah,
so
yeah.
and so, I was at work one day and I was talking to a guy and he's like, "Hey, what?" Because this guy at work really likes the song, and he's like, "You need to rebrand yourself, man. That Joe Possum thing and going into he was speaking sort of power into my life. He's like, this places you're going, bro. That Joe Possum ain't gonna work. You need to rename
Mhm.
yourself." And I said, "Well, I'm just gonna use Joe Dominguez." So then I started googling it and I saw just how popular the Joe Dominguez. I won't say
Yeah.
unoriginal. We'll say how popular
Right.
Joe Dominguez to us. It's everywhere. Then apparently there's a famous guy in Australia who's a famous musician and an artist named Joe Dominguez. But there's an Australian guy named Joe Dominguez. And so it's such a saturated name. So I'm like, how do I separate myself? So then he was like, why don't you just get it over with and call yourself Lazarus, man? And so I just was like, okay. And so I started looking that up. And then there's a Lazarus Dominguez. There's a Joe Lazarus, but there is no Joe Lazarus Dominguez. And so going to Google and then going to YouTube and searching these names and trying to find out the popularity if it does exist. And so with that combination, it didn't exist. So that's how we started the rebranding. But my biggest challenge has been fear every step of the way. What's so crazy is you tell yourself, I want to be that guy performing,
Mhm.
but I get such stage fright, almost to where I get nauseous and my hands start to kind of do
Mm.
this. And it's gotten to the point, Mike, where I wanted to walk off. Yeah,
Really?
I've gotten up to before a show, even playing at
Wow.
Kingdom Church, where I'm like, ugh. It's almost like I'm about to get on a really fast roller coaster or something that I'm scared of. And
Oh, wow.
yeah, so to answer the
That's
question,
wild.
it's been fear. And you wouldn't think when you see me up there, and
Right.
once I start going, it's the place where I want to be.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
doing it, but it's just taking that step and walking onto that stage.
Well, I
It's
think God
something.
takes over, right? I really believe kind of that's whenever God kind of steps in.
Yeah.
You've taken that step of faith and then he kind of takes over, right? And he's able to do that. So was there any other deep meaning for the name Lazarus other than him just throwing that bone out there?
No, I discussed it with my dad, and he's like, "Well, it's the perfect name because Lazarus
This is where I was getting at
kind
here.
of rose from the dead, man." And
Yeah.
and he's like, in all accounts, if we're honest, he's like, if I'm honest with you, son, you're actually probably supposed to be dead.
Yeah,
and you're not even supposed to be here. And so I think he's like, I think it's a fitting name. And
for
so
sure.
I think so. He's like, you've kind of risen from a lot of things that you shouldn't have bounced back from. Lord knows a lot of people don't bounce back
Correct.
from. I know a lot of folks that you know didn't bounce back from divorce. I know a lot of folks that don't bounce back from prison. I know a lot of folks that don't bounce back from growing up in the hood or alcohol
Correct.
or drugs. And he's like, you seem to, bounce back from all these things. So for those of us that know you, it's a fitting sort of,
Correct.
comparison.
Yeah.
So, I'm digging it, man. I'm liking it. I'm looking forward to the day I have this fantasy, that one day the music is going to take off and then you hear the chant, Lazarus,
Yeah,
that'd be great,
yeah.
so
That would be awesome. And so, and like you said, it is fitting,
yeah,
and so that's a very fitting name, right, for you to, because again, like your dad said, it's you bounced back, and you were kind of spiritually dead for a while, but then it
yeah,
came back to life, and you were there, and a little bit for myself, I kind of was spiritually dead at one point in time,
yeah,
but then whenever we linked with this church, with Kingdom Church, and I got around Pastor Miguel, it was like that fuse, right? That a candle that just lit up another candle.
mm,
And sometimes you have to surround yourself with people like that,
yeah,
and they help you grow, and they're
yeah,
able to help you get to where you need to be. And God's all about relationships.
yeah,
You started playing because of a relationship. You played somewhere, somebody noticed you, you played somewhere else. It's all about relationships, right? And
yeah.
and and God sets those relationships up for us to be successful.
I can't say enough about Pastor Miguel, and he was the been a big in Kingdom Church period.
Mhm.
Pastor Blanca has always been so nice to me and just allowing me to go up there and play without
Right,
even I have found on this little journey that most churches are not willing to just let a stranger come in and
right,
take the stage because this is their flock, this is their congregation,
right.
and it's been kind of unexpected to me. There's this sort of protective shield where they're like,
Hmm.
wait a minute, man, it doesn't
Correct.
work like that. You know what I mean?
Right.
You need to come and show up, and Pastor Miguel and Kingdom Church and Pastor Blanca have always been, and even Phil and yourself and your wife, and then Kyle, everybody a part of that team has been so welcoming to me. It's like when I walk in there, it's like going home, man. Like
Yeah,
I
man.
recognize the smell, I see the people, and
Yeah.
even the youngsters. Some of the youngsters that I've played played up there with.
Yeah.
Are so welcoming and they smile like, "Oh, Joe,"
Yeah.
and so
Yeah.
that's really great.
That's
So
awesome, brother.
yeah,
That's awesome. So let me ask you this. So what accomplishment are you most proud of right now, and why?
um, I would say working at the juvenile. I never thought that I would be doing that. You know,
Yeah.
so just it's really impactful for me, even though I don't see the fruits of it from the kids. It's I just never thought I'd be back. You
Yeah.
know, it's I've been lost so many times in my life, and for me to go back into that place and walk those hallways that I was locked up in. Um, you know, it's a real difficult relationship because, like I said, you don't see yourself making an impact, and then you say,
Right.
"Well, I'm not making a great deal of money." I think that's a hard thing for me as well. Knowing that I am an intelligent individual, and I am highly capable and highly functional, and I feel like with my experience in working in organizations, I have this saying, right? All I need is a phone, a laptop, an internet connection, and a printout of who everybody is in this company and how I can contact them with their emails. And you can plug me in any department and I can make anything happen at any point. It doesn't matter where you put me. Yeah, I need you to go over into sales today. Bet. Let's go. I need you to work with material planning and ordering. Let's go. I need you to work with production today. Okay. I need you to fly over here to this location and we need to fire the general manager. You need to hire another one. Let's go. I need you to order forklifts. I need you to order 10 tons of steel. I need you to get this over to South Africa. I need you to get this order from Russia because they're going to have tariffs and embargoes and we're not going to be able to work with them. I need you to fly this stuff from a different location and get it over here into the United
Hmm.
States with this budget. And so knowing that I have that experience and that capability, um, you know, it's difficult as well. There's this internal struggle
Mhm.
to, go back and make,
Mhm.
live a little more comfortable life financially. But I don't know, man. There's a draw to this place, and I'm very proud of the fact that I'm even working here. Um, they do have a concerning the background. They do, just a kind of a disclaimer. They don't just let anybody work there.
Correct.
You have a 10-year. Uh, what they have on their website is you can't have had a felony within, I think, 10 or 20 years. And mine was when I was 17.
Mhm.
So I'm 43 now. So
Right.
I've gone past that time frame, and so that's why, if anybody's wondering, like, oh, how is he able to go there? And even then, if it has gone that far, you can't have had particular crimes, like, anything to do with crimes against the elderly or
Children.
children,
Yeah.
or financial crimes of moral turpitude that you tried to steal or lie. So not to minimize, I kind of
Right.
got in a fight and hurt somebody really bad. So, but answer the question, not ramble too much. I would say that's kind of the thing that I'm most proud of, and has been the biggest unexpected left turn in my
Right.
life, based off what I have done. Yeah, it's great meaning to me, and even though, like we said, you don't
The
see
impact right
you
away.
don't see the impact. You don't see the tree grow. You're just
Yeah.
in a field planting
That's
seeds,
it.
and the field is never ending because you have more kids coming in, and you're just, that you're going to be planting in this field, and when you're going to get to the end of this row, and they're going to pick you up and take you to another field, and you're never going to see that one again.
Mhm.
You may see that tree
Right.
years down the
Years down
road,
the road.
like
Yeah.
you have, but for the most part, you may not.
Yeah. You're just planting the seed.
You're just planting seeds and walking
Mhm.
away,
That's it.
and so yeah. Anyway,
And in the order of things, right? You plant the seed, and then somebody else comes along and
somebody's
waters it.
waters it. I heard that from Mr. Battle.
Yeah.
He told me that. Another
Yeah.
guy that works there at the juvenile. He's been great to me, very patient with me. And I can't say enough about him and those guys there. But that's I would say that's the proudest thing that I've done. It's very unexpected, and me of all people. And when I'm putting that uniform on, I'm like, I don't know how this is happening, buddy. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So,
I hear you, man. That's awesome. So let me ask you this last final question. What advice would you give to others wanting to follow in a career in music or
mm.
in a career of juvenile and giving back and helping others?
um, I think first and foremost is get used to being uncomfortable, and get
Mm,
used to walking through your fear, because that has been crippling for me at times. And I got started with music late in life, even though I could play. You know, let's say, well, why didn't you go to, say, this restaurant who has musicians? Why don't you just go over there and ask them to play? Because I was scared. I didn't start doing it until getting out onto stage and stuff like that until I was almost 40. I was 30, probably 37 or 38.
yeah.
And
Wow.
yeah. And so it was fear. And it was like, Sonia was one of the first ones that said, well, you need to go and try. And even walking into that first place, with a little card, and saying, hey, I play music, and getting told, no, we already have somebody.
Mm,
So get comfortable with being uncomfortable and walking through your fear
mm.
every single day. And even now, I still battle fear with music, and does my voice sound good enough? I'm getting too old.
Those
There's
insecurities.
insecurities, and I think everybody does. When you hear a lot of
Right.
folks talk, everybody has them. We have
Right.
things that you don't like the way you look. I battle with weight. I'm constantly battling with that, and so the advice that I would give anybody, young or old, is on the other side of your fear. Your dreams are on the other side of your fears.
Mhm.
And I'm still battling it. I want to go to bigger places and bigger audiences with my music. Um, but I'm terrified playing in a church with 30 people. So, and
Yeah, yeah.
I and so and the other side of that too is take small steps, but take steps.
Mhm.
Whatever it is, like say with your podcast, right? We talked about that a little bit before we got started. Um, you know, just interviewing somebody You say, well, I want to get I want to get the pastor of like say River Point or something like
Mhm.
that, or one of these guys. One of
Right, right, right.
these
Yeah,
guys that
mega
have
church of some sort. Yeah.
mega church. You know, but or I want to get Mr. Hill here or something
Right,
like
right,
this.
right,
These big people that you'd have to get over, but you take small steps. You say, well, maybe I get somebody from the church that I'm in now, and
right.
then just kind of hone my skills as far as even walking them in the door and sitting them down,
Correct.
and honing your own skills as an interviewer of how, which isn't easy either. Having a
Right.
bouncing conversation or when do I let somebody go and just
Mhm.
talk when they're in a zone, or I'm sure there's
Right.
little techniques and details to that. And so more to your point is like talking to anybody wanting to do anything. It's you're going to have to walk through your fear. It's
Mhm.
going to be scary,
Yeah.
and you're going to have to plan. You're going to have to plan down to the detail, expect the unexpected, and take some steps, no matter how small. Take some steps.
Yeah.
With me doing the movies or the music video, um, it was just I would wear what I was going to wear in the video. I'd put it on in my room and watch myself in the mirror play, so that I didn't make faces that were too ugly. Because sometimes you get into it, like, oh, and I'll make this, I'll squinch up, and I'm like, yeah, that's not attractive, or that doesn't look great. Sometimes you'll see a singer that is really good for me, and they make these really terrible faces,
Yeah, yeah.
and so I'm practicing the small details and the small little things that.
Mm.
So I'm playing makeup in my room. I'm getting
Right,
dressed
right.
in the wardrobe and doing this thing in front of the mirror. So sometimes you just have to act like a kid again in your mind, and go along with your gut, walk through your fear. And me mentioning me playing makeup in my room, looking in the mirror, that's a small step.
Mhm.
That's me preparing for what I'm
Yeah.
gonna do at the music
Something
shoot
bigger. Yep.
2 weeks from I had the music shoot 2 weeks from now, and so I started preparing. It was a small step, or even making a list or something like that. That's a
Yeah.
step, but take some steps and practice, practice, practice.
I did a deal the other day, and we kind of mentioned it earlier before we started.
Yeah,
And you said, take those steps through those fears, right? And the other day I put out a video talking about the buffalo mentality,
yeah,
right? And that buffalo mentality, when they see a storm coming,
yeah.
they run to the storm versus running away from the storm,
Really?
right? So buffalo, they run to the storm to get through the storm because they know what's on the other side of the storm, which
Yeah.
is watered grass, which is
Oh, that's
sunshine,
crazy.
right?
Oh, that's cool.
Which is a blessing.
Yeah,
Versus cows, they kind of walk away from storms, and the storm follows them,
yeah,
and then they'll get stuck in the storm a lot longer
yeah,
than what they need to be in it.
yeah,
And as people, that's how we need to face our storms in life. Just face them head on. Let's get through them. Because on the other side of that storm
yeah,
is God's blessing.
yeah,
And it's waiting. Let's not try to put it off on the back burner because then it's going to keep following us everywhere we go, right? We keep getting tormented by this storm. It keeps just following us
yeah,
because we're not trying to get through it.
yeah,
And I think, as we get through it, and like you said, and you got to face that fear and go through it because what's on the other side is going to be a great reward, of what we're doing. So let's tell everybody before we end this. Let's tell everybody where they can find your music. Plug in the all your all your plugs that you have, where they can find you.
yeah. So yeah, I am on. The name that I have chosen to go under is Joe Lazarus Dominguez, and you can find that on YouTube. The track that I recently released is called "In the Name of the Father," and we shot a video for it. I recorded a song. Um, in a studio, and released it on all platforms. So if you have, I really want to challenge you, if we could, we put
Yeah.
this out. Okay, so I'm gonna start this challenge myself, and I did this the other day. Is I said we put the music out on all platforms. It's on iTunes, YouTube Music, Spotify. Deezer, which I don't know what platform that is. I've never
Okay.
listened to. Maybe that's a younger platform. And Amazon Music. So the challenge is, what I'd like you to do, if you could, I did this the other day for the first time. I was getting ready for work, and I have this Alexa thing over in the corner, and I said, Alexa, hello, play "In the Name of the Father" by Joe Lazarus Dominguez. She said, playing "In the Name of the Father" by Joe Lazarus Dominguez. Boom, the song started. And I was like,
Really?
I got so pumped up. I was like,
Oh
yeah.
wow.
So the challenge would be is make a video of yourself telling Alexa to play "In the Name of the Father" by Joe Lazarus Dominguez. And if you could make that video, you can just do a little short and post it on my page or post it on your page, any page, and
Yeah.
want to see how many people can do that. That would be really, really cool.
That would be a cool
It's quite an
challenge. So
accomplishment.
yes, for sure.
So
For sure.
yeah, you can find that on you can go to any one of those platforms. Like I said, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube Music, Amazon Music, and if you want to watch the video, go to "In the Name of the Father," Joe Lazarus on YouTube, and then also on YouTube you can just type that in and you can hear the actual track as well. I am on TikTok, which I just posted a video of the Kingdom Church
Yes.
performance, which was actually supposed to go in the video, but the idea was to get a bunch of churches to go and kind of make a collage of me performing at different
Hmm.
churches. But I had found that they were kind of
Protective.
they were protective, understandably so, but
Right.
it didn't really make me happy concerning the idea of the video was supposed to be me playing at a bunch of different churches and the congregations all singing my song.
Right.
Um, but it didn't really coalesce to that, and so I had to just kind of step back and do one of me being at the house I grew up in the
Mhm.
Colonia and on Veracruz, which turned out good anyway.
Oh, great video. So
And
if
so
y'all haven't seen the video, go watch the video. The
it,
video is very powerful.
it's a good video, and I appreciate it. And so we tried to put the footage of me being at the church in there, but it just got unbalanced.
Hmm.
It was like a harsh plug where it didn't really
Right.
make
They kind of
sense.
blend in.
Yeah, it didn't blend in very good as far as the continuous idea. But
Right.
so yeah, you can look me up on TikTok, Joe Lazarus, on TikTok and on Instagram and Facebook. I appreciate any of your follows, any of your likes, and so the goal now is phase three of this song is to go out and perform at different churches, and so that's what I'm doing now. So if you guys know anybody, if you're at any churches, any other churches, that could be interested, let me know. I think I'm going to be performing at Twin City Church. I'm in conversations with Pastor Christopher Rodriguez,
Okay.
who's a great pastor, and they're going to be getting a new location in Rosenberg, I think on Avenue H. They're moving into soon, so I look forward to playing with
Nice.
them and just getting this song out there, and
Yeah.
hopefully get some traction. And I'm going to be going back into the studio soon to try and finish up my album, which is titled "Let It Fly." So
Nice.
yeah, I chose that title because I started saying that a lot in my daily conversation, like talking about like being scared to do something, right?
Yeah.
Just let it fly, man. Let it fly.
Yeah. Yeah.
And like somebody gets upset, and you're like, hey, really let it fly, huh? And so I like that term because it's in the sense of just letting something go. Just
Yeah.
let it rip, baby. Let it fly.
Yeah. See
And
where it
so,
lands.
yeah,
You
man.
know.
So that's where you can find me at, and you guys don't forget about that Alexa challenge. And
Yes.
I really appreciate you
That
having
would
me
be
out here.
awesome, man. Hey, I appreciate you for visiting us and stopping by. We appreciate it. And remember, guys, like always, there's somebody out there that's thinking about you. There's somebody out there that's praying for you, and there's somebody out there that loves you. We're thinking about you. We love you, and we are most definitely praying for you. So again, we want to thank Joe for stopping by and being part of the Kingdom Focus podcast, brother. I wish nothing but the best and all the success in the world. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, brother.
Yes,
Thanks
sir.
for having me, man.
Yes, sir.
Bye, guys.
See y'all later.